Hi friends, it's Miss Welch. Like we talked about on Friday, I know we're going to be spending some time apart. So one thing I had in mind is that I could at least continue our read alouds. I know we're not going to be seeing each other a little bit in school. However, one of our favorite parts of the day was when we would gather together and do a read aloud. I'm going to be reading a couple of picture books. And then on Friday or Monday, I ordered some chapter books off of Amazon. Miss Welch forgot to bring some home. So I went ahead and ordered them for us. And starting on Friday or Monday, I'll go ahead and start reading a chapter book for you guys since we were really enjoying those. But today we are going to read a picture book titled Chester the Brave. And before we left for home on Friday, we talked about how right now is kind of a scary time and there's a lot of things going on that we don't really understand what's happening. But the most important thing is that your guys' 6 and 7-year-old bodies were made to fight this virus going around. And I know it's kind of scary because we aren't with our friends and we have to stay home and all of that. But I wanted to kind of give us some normalcy and continue something we really enjoyed. And I thought this book was kind of fitting for us right now because we kind of have to be brave, even though kind of some scary stuff is going on right now. But the most important thing is to remember is that your guys' bodies are really made to fight this thing that's going around right now. And even though we might spend some time apart, Miss Welch still loves you just as much. And I'm still just as excited to see you when we come back to school, and I know you guys miss each other as well. So I thought this would kind of be something fun that even though we're not all together, we're all still kind of taking part in and hearing the same read aloud every day. So I'll be posting one of these every weekday, and then hopefully Friday or Monday I'll be starting a fun chapter book for you guys once it gets here. But today we're going to go ahead and read Chester the Brave. So let me go ahead and get situated so you guys are able to see the pictures. So we're going to read the story Chester the Brave, written by Audrey Penn and illustrated by Barbara Gibson. And we haven't read this book yet this year, but it has a very good message. Chester Raccoon sat snuggled in his mother's lap. The last golden rays of sundown shone through their tree hole, and his younger brother Ronnie lay curled up fast asleep on the far side of their hollow. "This is my very best time," Chester told his mother, lifting his eyes to hers. "This is my very best time, too," she told him sweetly. "Do you still want me to tell you about the little robin?" "Yes, please." "Well," Mrs. Raccoon began her story, "he stepped up to the ledge of his nest, bent his little legs, lifted his tiny wings, and said, 'I can't, I'm too afraid,' and hopped back into the safety of his nest." "He was too afraid to fly?" asked Chester. "Yes, he was," answered Mrs. Raccoon. Chester looked very worried. He dropped his head and stuck out his lower lip. Did the little robin think it was okay to be afraid? "He thought it meant he wasn't brave," explained Chester's mother. "You see, the little robin's brother and sister flew their very first time, and he thought that meant they were very brave. And if they were very brave, he thought it meant he wasn't." Chester appeared very upset. "Was he right?" he asked his mother. Mrs. Raccoon smoothed out the fur on top of Chester's head. "Well, the little robin's father told him that it wasn't that his brother and sister were brave. It was the fact that they simply weren't bothered." Chester lifted his head and peered at his mother. "Well, what does that mean?" Mrs. Raccoon laughed. "The little robin wasn't sure what it meant either, so his father asked him if he was bothered when he was eating worms." "Oh, yuck!" shrieked Chester. "That's disgusting!" "But what did he say?" "He said he wasn't bothered eating worms at all. He said he loved eating worms, especially the big, long, thick, stretchy kind." "Oh, bleck!" bleated Chester. His nose and mouth twisted and squished together, and his entire body shuddered. Eating worms would bother me. Mrs. Raccoon nodded. It would bother me too, she confessed. Then the little robin's father asked him if he was bothered when he was singing, and the little birdie began tweeting and said he wasn't bothered when he was singing at all. Singing is a lot better than eating worms, said Chester. I agree, said Mrs. Raccoon. Then the little bird's father told him that being brave wasn't about flying when he wasn't bothered to fly. Being brave was about flying when he was bothered to fly, but found the courage to fly anyway because he knew he must. Then his father asked him if he was bothered when he was reciting his flying lessons in front of all the other little birdies who nested in our tree. The poor little robin got all aflutter. He hopped up and down and flapped his wings, just like he did the time the skunk sprayed our tree from down below. The little robin said that reciting his lessons in front of all of the other little birds was the worst thing he had ever done in his whole life. Suddenly, Chester began to tremble, and he nestled deeper into his mother's soft, comforting arms. What's the matter? His mother asked. Reciting lessons in front of the other animals at Owl's teacher's school is the worst thing I've ever done in my whole life, too, he whimpered. Is that so? Asked Mrs. Raccoon. She gave Chester a reassuring hug and then took his tiny hand in hers and gently kissed the center of his palm. Shall I tell you what happened to the little robin? Or would you rather jump on top of Ronnie and wake him up for school? Chester giggled. I want to know what happened to the robin. Well, the very next day, the little robin's mother tucked one of her own tiny flight feathers into his wing and told him it was for good luck. So even though he was still bothered about reciting his lessons, the tiny bird stood in front of all the other little birdies of our tree and twittered, I lift my head to the clouds, I push off with my feet, I flap my wings, and let the gentle breeze take me for a ride. Gulp. And while he was still afraid to fly, he found the courage he needed and said to himself, I am very brave. Then he stepped up to the edge of his nest, spread his wings, pushed off with his feet, and flew away. After all, he was a very brave little robin. Hooray! Clapped Chester. Do you know what I think being brave is? Asked Mrs. Raccoon. Chester shook his head. I think being brave is about 3 little words. Think, tell, do. If you think you can't, tell yourself you can and do it. Mrs. Raccoon lifted Chester's hand. Can you see my kiss in your palm? Chester laughed. No? Well, you know it's there, and it's for luck, just like the robin's little feather. Chester jumped off his mother's lap, bent his knees, opened his arms, and yelled, I am very brave. Then he ran to the other side of the hollow and with a flying leap landed on top of his brother. Wake up, Ronnie, it's time for school. Chester the Brave has a speech to make. Later that night, Chester Raccoon stood on a branch at Owl Teacher's School. He remembered what his mother said about what his mother said about think, tell, do. If I think I can't, I tell myself I can and do it. And he found the courage he needed to tell himself, I am very brave. Then he opened his hand, and there in the middle of his palm was his mother's gentle kiss for good luck. And even though Chester was still the tiniest bit afraid, he recited his lesson in front of all the other animals. After all, Chester is a very brave little raccoon. The end. So, boys and girls, the reason I read you this story is because even though we're going through some stuff right now, just remember to be brave. Remember what they said in this story: think, tell, do. Think you're really brave and tell yourself you are, and just do it. Remember, your 6 and 7 year old bodies are made to fight this thing. And I know it's kind of scary because we're a little young and we don't know what exactly is going on. But just remember, Miss Welch loves you. We will be together again very soon. And I'm always here if you want to reach out. Remember, we've been using Seesaw in class. If you ever want to send me a video or anything, you can definitely do that and I will respond to you. Remember to read every single day and write about what you read. I love you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow with our next Read Aloud.